Hi, this is Teddy. Hi, this is Arthur. You're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Network. Learn more about Demcast at demcastusa.com. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am joined tonight by a returning guest. This is Carolyn Long, who is running for Congress in the Washington 3rd District. Hi, Carolyn.
Hey, Kelly. How are you?
I am terrific, and I'm super excited to talk to you again. We did a whole bunch of episodes right in the lead up to 2018, so it's possible that listeners may have missed one or two. So can we start with just sort of an introduction again of who you are and why you're running for Congress?
So who I am is a small town girl from the Pacific Northwest. Grew up in rural communities all my life, most notably in Brookings, Oregon, where my dad had a farm stand that I worked at since the age of 12, which is a lot of fun. Taught me personal responsibility, value of hard work, importance of community. My dad also told me he was teaching me a trade. I thought he was full of beans. But when I went to college, I ended up working in and running the produce department at Safeway. So it helped pay my way through college. I was a journeyman, very proud worker and member of that union. And then subsequently went to graduate school in New Jersey and came home every summer to work in my dad's store. And at that point, we also had a small farm, which is a lot of fun. And then I've been teaching at Washington State University, Vancouver for the last 24 years. My field is political science and my subfield public law with a focus on Congress and the courts. So I ran for the first time to run for public office in 2018 against Jamie Herrera Butler. And we came within 5 points, which we were pretty excited about. Very much looking forward to the second round.
So one of the things I like to ask when people decide to run again is sort of what you learned in the first run around that you're using this time around. You know, you always hear like it's helpful to have run for office before, you know, when you go to run. So what are the kinds of things that actually are different, are easier, are clearer to you when you're running a second time?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I want to talk a little bit about the last time. You know, we got in fairly late. We entered the race on November 30th, which was around the holidays. So we really lost 2 months. And so the one thing that I learned is that you have to start early. And so we launched our campaign in July, which is 6 months earlier than previous, because it's the one commodity you can't have enough of is time. So we learned that in order to meet as many voters as possible, in order to get our story out, you need to have sufficient time to allocate for that. It's a large district. I've got 7 counties, and it takes a lot of time to get around. So that's the main strategic thing that I learned. What I learned from the campaign is how important it is to be out in the district as much as possible to meet with voters. You know, I held over almost 50 town halls, whereas my opponent doesn't do live town halls. I had numerous coffees and have a cold one with Carolyn throughout the district. And one of the things that I learned is that voters are desperate to have representatives that are up close and listening to their stories. And so we did that a lot last time, and we're going to do it this time because that's what they value. And I was committed then, I'm committed now to be present, accountable, and committed to working hard on behalf of people of Southwest Washington. So that is the most valuable thing a candidate can do, is to show that they really can represent the people. So that's good. I also learned how important it is to have volunteers. We had almost 2,400 volunteers in our campaign. It allowed us to knock on over 100,000 doors, to make tens of thousands of phone calls, to really show people that we're fighting hard to win this seat. And we had that because people were very excited and enthusiastic about the chance to flip this seat.
So can you talk some about the district? I think people think of Washington State as a fairly liberal place and probably forget that, you know, not all parts of Washington are super blue. So this is a seat that's currently held by a Republican, but as you mentioned, you came close to flipping it last time. What is the sort of makeup of the district?
I would describe the district as fiercely independent. Before the incumbent, Brian Baird, a Democrat, held the seat for almost a dozen years. And prior to that, it went back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. So it's absolutely a competitive seat that we're competing for. The way the district looks is similar to a lot of districts in the state and also the country. We have an urban core, which tends to be more Democratic, an industrial county, more blue collar, and then several rural communities. And in those rural communities, they are focused on issues like bringing broadband internet into their towns, which is very important. So what I hear in Skamania County is quite different than Clark County, but I think that we have wide appeal for most of the people who are in the district.
And what are some of the things that you hear from people? So you said it's so important to be out and talking to them. What are the things they're worried about right now?
Well, the first thing is I think it's important to know how independent-minded people are in the 3rd District. While it is conservative, people pride themselves on their independence. We have a large number of independents in the district. What I'm hearing about today, Kelly, and this cycle is the same as last cycle. They are fed up with the representative who isn't present in the district, who doesn't seem to be listening to their concerns, who doesn't hold town halls and doesn't visit the area. So they're concerned about that. But in terms of issues, it's a lot of the issues that we're seeing nationally. People very much want access to affordable health care. We have to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Everything's going up in terms of price, and people certainly aren't making that up in wages. Hearing a lot about the need to invest in infrastructure in my urban areas, that's bridges, particularly the I-5 bridge. And in the rural areas, which are really struggling, it's the access to high-speed internet. If you have good broadband, that may open up markets for small businesses and educational opportunities for people who may want to pursue education or apprenticeships if it can be done online. Hearing a lot about the environment, as we should, when we've got so much attention on the beautiful Pacific Northwest and wanting to preserve our way of life, preserving public lands and waters. And then hearing about education as well, but not just higher education, which I'm familiar with, but how to invest in trade schools and skills schools so that people can get those high-wage jobs. But all of that reflects a real concern that working-class Washingtonians have been left behind, that we hear about these great economic gains that people have made, but working-class Americans aren't seeing them. And they're paying more for everything from college tuition to groceries to fuel, and especially going back to the main issue, which is prescription drugs. So people are still struggling, and that's not what you hear in the news. You hear about things going well, and certainly people, the voters of Southwest Washington are not reflecting that in their conversations with me.
Yeah. So you teach classes, as you mentioned, on political science. You teach classes on public civility. Can you tell me how to bring civility back to government?
Sure. The best thing, how much time do we have, Kelly? The most important thing is to learn to listen. So often people listen to respond. They don't listen to understand. And one of the things that I've learned while campaigning is, you've got 2 ears and you've got 1 mouth. And in order to really have civil conversations with people, you have to try to understand where they're coming from. And usually we just get into our corner and we don't seek that common ground. So I think always having an open mind and listening to people, even if we disagree with them, and then understanding where they're coming from provides the foundation for those types of opportunities to learn. I've had practice this all my life. I come from a Republican family. I'm married to a conservative. And what we do is we try to find those areas that we agree upon, and usually that's values. We believe in similar values about liberty and equality and tolerance, and certain beliefs about working hard and personal responsibility. And you can have conversations on those values and beliefs, which could then sometimes get into conversations about policy. But you really have to start with electing the right people, and people who have that open mind and that perspective. And that's what I bring to this campaign. I'm very proud of the civil campaign I ran and what I would bring to Washington, D.C. You can't demonize the other side because you disagree with them. You have to understand you have different opinions, but we're all human beings. We all often want the same things. We just have different ways of getting there.
This may be an odd follow-up question, but you have written some books on constitutional law. How do we get back to following the Constitution?
first of all, again, hiring the right people.
Yeah.
I talk about the Constitution every day, and I hear people who mention the Constitution or they mention certain rights, but they don't really understand it. But I see running for office as a really good opportunity to talk about constitutionalism, to speak about the importance of checks and balances, to speak about the dangers of having an imperial presidency and the importance of Congress, doing its constitutional duty on issues for trade, on appropriating funds. It is a fundamental law of the land, and we need to return to it. And I think it takes having that basic conversation, which is it's nonpartisan. The conversation about the Constitution is nonpartisan, and we just need to do it more, and we need to talk about it more in schools as well.
So you mentioned that you're hearing from people about the environment. It's a beautiful area of the country where you are. I was just recently just a little bit south of there in Oregon, and it's just gorgeous. What are the kinds of things you think could be popularly accepted as ways to fight climate change, to protect the environment in ways that make it more enjoyable for people to use the outdoors? What are some of the kinds of things you would like to see Congress doing?
Well, I think protecting public lands. We have a lot in the West, and we have to make sure that they are protected. And I know that this administration has tried on a couple of occasions to open up some national parks and to open up some public lands for development. And I think that there's probably bipartisan support to oppose things like that, because there are so many people who enjoy the outdoors and who recognize the importance of that for both recreation, but also sort of preserving our beautiful land. So I think that's one area where there's a lot of support. Another area is we're talking a lot about weaning ourselves off of fossil fuel projects, and you've seen that in various fights in certain areas of the country, and that means, looking for clean energy sources. We often rely on hydro here in the Pacific Northwest. It's certainly a cleaner source of energy, but also looking more at solar and wind. And we're seeing that a lot in the state of Washington, because those are ways in which we can meet our energy needs while also not pursuing projects which rely on what will soon be, I think, antiquated ways of providing energy. And I think as time goes on, we're going to see that again is also something that will enjoy bipartisan support. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're certainly turning the tide on that.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I mean, it seems like there have to be things that we could all agree on, that we're going to have to agree on. We're not going to have a whole lot of choice in the matter soon.
Well, and what I found, so for the issue of climate change is an interesting one, because if you start a conversation by saying, I believe climate change is real and it's human caused, and somebody says, I believe it's not, and it's not caused by humans, and it's, cow farts, then you're not having a good conversation. But if you sort of talk about ways in which climate change has affected our daily lives, and you talk about mitigation, then you're going to find agreement. So, for instance, in my district, there's flooding in the Chehalis Basin. It's connected to changing weather patterns. So it's about how that particular issue is a problem, hurts businesses and homes, so let's try to fix it. Or we talk about how we have really terrible forest fires in the Pacific Northwest, and part of the intensity of those fires is connected to the issue of climate. So how do we talk about what we're seeing because of climate change, and how do we address that, because it's a problem that should be addressed, rather than is it real or isn't it? I mean, it's that latter thing that if you start there, you usually run into trouble. We all agree forest fires and flooding is bad. Let's talk about how to fix it. And that gets us into a conversation eventually about climate.
So I saw that I believe another podcast asked you if you like Star Wars or Star Trek, and unfortunately you answered incorrectly.
I know. I heard from many people. I had no idea. But you know that it's the first movie I saw in the small town of Rogue River, Oregon. So it was imprinted on me. But yeah, I got a lot of grief, and I've got to watch some more Star Trek movies. And the show, right? And the show.
It's amazing, these things that become sort of touchstones.
I know. I like that Great American Baking Show. Did that help me out a lot for a reality show?
Yeah. Hey, I'm all about that. And I don't know if you still have a chance to, but I recall that you used to make your own jam.
I do. So I'm very excited to to tell you that I had a jam making party with one of my supporters, and we did blueberry lemon, we did strawberry rhubarb, and I think just plain strawberry, and it was a lot of fun. And this is crazy, and my team is going to kill me, but last week I was at the fair in Clark County, and we checked out the competition. And so I'm ready for 2020, so next year. And so I'm going to be experimenting a little with fun recipes. So it's soothing. It's fun for me. And I think I told you I had a jam business when I worked at my dad's store, that it started when we had a lot of perishable fruit. And so I would make jam out of it because I hated waste. And so we had great recipes: strawberry, kiwi, nectarine, pineapple, grand prize winner, by the way, blueberry lemon. So yes, sorry to go on about my jam, but I'm it's a passion of mine.
Hey, we could turn this into a whole jam podcast.
Exactly. Have me back just to talk about jam. And it's low sugar jam, low sugar. That's important too.
Excellent. So another thing I wanted to talk about is that I know you're a mom, you have a daughter, and this feels to me like a particularly challenging time to be raising daughters. I have sons. Yes. But, I wanted to ask sort of what she thinks about you running for office, and, how being a mom sort of affects your view on politics, your view on campaigning.
So I think most moms would say that our views about our future are really shaped by what we want to leave for our children. So I think sort of on a global sense, my concerns about the environment, my concerns about sort of our political institutions falling apart are because I want my child to live in a world where the environment, is lovely, where we have a safe democracy, where she's happy to participate as an active citizen. She's 14 going on 35. And so my daughter is just the most amazing kid. Because I'm a Democrat, my husband's a Republican. She considers herself a Demopublican or Republicrat. And so it depends on who she's mad at, depending on where we are in that. But she is very excited, does like going to some events, but also she's 14. So anything that's not about her is a little hard. But I really think that she is one of the most amazing politicians to be that I've ever met. I had her come to some of my town halls, and seeing her as a 13-year-old work a room better than I ever could have means that she's going to be a phenomenal. And I used to say that she's going to run a small country, but I think she's going to run a big country someday. So I'm actually in awe of her. This Halloween, I want to go as her. I want to be Tennyson for Halloween because she's so impressive.
So are there other topics that you would like to make sure that we talk about today?
Well, I think participation is really important. One of the things that we saw in 2018 was there were people who became involved in politics for the first time, started voting for the first time. I mentioned the number of volunteers that we had. I would sort of rally the people going out in the field to knock doors, and I'd always ask, how many of you are doing this for the first time? And at least a third, if not more, of the people raised their hands. And so what we saw in 2018 were people who really saw the need to get involved beyond merely voting. For some people, it's knocking on doors or making phone calls. For other people, it's registering people to vote. For you, it's, having podcasts that are calling attention to important races. I mean, the silver lining in what we've been suffering under for the last 3.5 years are that people are newly activated in politics. They're energized and they make a difference. Democrats won 40 seats because people made that happen. And we saw that with increased rates of participation. And that's really exciting. So I hope we always talk about that, not just as a silver lining to what people think are troubling times, but as renewed hope in our democracy. And I'm very excited by that. I think that's important. And people are talking about politics, and it's going to get us beyond this polarization. So one thing that I've done at the university for the last couple of years in my research on civility is I've talked about how hyperpolarized the electorate is. And how the loudest voices on both sides seem to dominate the political conversation. And really the only way to fix that is to expand the electorate, is to get more people involved, because a lot of the people sitting on the sidelines aren't your hardcore ideologues who have, litmus tests that you have to fulfill in order to have them support you. They're people who are reasonable, and not that people aren't reasonable if they're ardent partisans, but they're people who really want to see where we have common ground to get things done. And if 2018 showed me anything, is that can happen. And that's the hope I have for 2020. And I definitely think it's going to occur. So I think that's very important to remind everybody. If people are listening to this podcast, they already know the fine work that you're doing, talking about these races. They're probably already involved, and they're probably already reaching out to their friends and neighbors. They need to do that even more because that's how we salvage our democracy. And when people get involved for the first time, they become lasting activists in our electorate, and that's important.
Yeah, one thing we have talked to our kids about, they'll say things like boo Republicans, which, is a sort of natural reaction to what they're hearing. But, we tell them that we want there to be a strong other side too, right? That's how government is supposed to work, is that there are people with maybe shared ultimate goals, but different ways of getting there. And that, that would actually make it all stronger. And I think that's what I've been feeling lately is not just, there are all these horrible things happening, but there's not strong pressure from both sides to be doing the best we can do.
That's right. And I think that diversity of opinion, both within a party and then also with the other party, is really important for our democracy. We should always constantly challenge our perspectives and listen to where other people are coming from. Because, let's face it, when you're elected to office, you represent everybody, Democrats, independents, Republicans. And so you can't demonize the other side. You have to understand where they're coming from, and have empathy for what led them to that position, and then try to find those areas of commonality. We can't, this negative partisanship that we're seeing is destroying our democracy. It's not good for anyone. And it's okay to be passionate. I'm a passionate person, but I'm passionate about process. I'm passionate about civility, and I'm passionate about my positions on issues, but I'm always going to be there listening. And I think we have to teach our kids that, and to avoid echo chambers, because echo chambers are one of the reasons why we're in the problem that we're at, be it who we spend time with, what we listen to, the social media that we use. All of that reinforces our viewpoints, and that's not good. So diversity is always good, even though sometimes it might be hard.
All right. So how do people help your campaign?
The best way is to pass the word along that we've got quite a race in our hands in the 3rd district. To come within 5 points from an incumbent who had won by 23 shows that we are a competitive race. To let them know that we had a great launch on July 8th. So in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the day, we launched our campaign in 3 cities and had 600 people show up, which is amazing. If they want to invest their time, we're always looking for volunteers. If they want to invest resources, sadly, contributions are important because it matters. We need the funds to get our message out. And frankly, last election, the Republican Party put in millions of dollars of negative ads on top of my opponent's negative ads. And so we need to oftentimes counter that and get our positive message out. So that's helpful. But letting people know it's competitive. We didn't catch fire until the very end of our campaign when we did well in the primary. I think right now having that attention early will help us get the resources that we need in order to be successful.
And I know we have listeners in Portland. So, guys, it's just over the border. Just hop over the border.
It was so thrilling to see the excitement in this race when people realized for the first time that we can win the seat back for the Democratic Party. We are really focused on our 2,400 volunteers in Southwest Washington who were canvassing for us and on the phones all the time. There were people in the rural parts of the county who saw a canvasser for the first time in decades. That shows how widespread our support is and how that support got us as close as we did, and how we're counting on that support to get us there in 2020.
All right. Excellent. Well, Carolyn, it's always so much fun to talk to you. I'm super excited that you're running again. I was really hoping that you would, so I was so thrilled to see that. And we will make sure to put your website and your social media up on our website so people can find that.
Thank you. I should have mentioned that. And thanks for having me on the program. I love what you're doing, highlighting these races. It's always a fun conversation. At some point, I'm going to have to bring my daughter into one of our conversations because I think it would be fun. I know you have a lot of moms out there who've got kids, and I think a program that focuses on sort of kids would be interesting because they certainly have a mind of their own, and we need to get them energized. So
yes,
that would be fun. But I think it's a great idea, but thank you for what you do. I mean, it's a great podcast, and it's a pleasure to be on it. Always a pleasure to come visit you again. So just let us know.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.